don't have any memories, really. Sucks that she couldn't have been there.
At the forefront of my mind and just
By 2013, Tiffany Whitton's life had become increasingly unstable long before she disappeared from that Walmart parking lot in Marietta, Georgia. She was 26 years old, small frame, bright blue eyes. Blonde hair she often dyed lighter than its natural color. Friends and family remembered her as someone who could seem warm, funny, and energetic one moment, then completely overwhelmed by addiction the next. Tiffany was also a mother. Her 6-year-old daughter was being raised primarily by Tiffany's own mother, while Tiffany struggled with drug use, financial instability, and repeated attempts to regain control of her life. At different points, family members believed she genuinely wanted to get clean. And at different points, Tiffany herself seemed to believe it too. But addiction had already reshaped much of her daily life. She had prior arrests, periods of disappearing from contact, short jail stays, trouble keeping stable work. In the months before she vanished, Tiffany had been working at an IHOP in Marietta. Though reports later stated she lost the job shortly before her disappearance following accusations connected to theft. By then, much of her life revolved around surviving one day at a time. Around that same period, Tiffany was living in Powder Springs with her boyfriend, Ashley "Red" Caudle. People who knew the couple later described the relationship as intense, unstable, and heavily connected to drug use. Neighbors reportedly remembered loud arguments coming from the trailer at different hours of the night. Friends described periods where the relationship appeared close, followed by stretches of conflict and volatility. At the same time, people around Tiffany also understood something else. Disappearing for short periods was not entirely unusual for her. That detail would later shape how seriously people initially interpreted her disappearance. Because when Tiffany stopped contacting people, many around her first assumed she would eventually resurface somewhere. Another temporary disappearance tied to addiction, arrests, or instability. But this time was different. On September 13, 2013, Tiffany and Red drove to a Walmart supercenter on Cobb Parkway in Marietta during the early morning hours. The store remained open all night. Bright, fluorescent lighting. Security cameras covering entrances and exits. Employees moving through aisles during the overnight shift. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary late-night Walmart. But within minutes, Tiffany Whitton would run barefoot out of those automatic doors and disappear under circumstances investigators still cannot fully explain more than a decade later. Inside the Walmart Supercenter on Cobb Parkway, Tiffany Whitton and Ashley "Red" Caudle spent close to an hour moving through the store during the early morning hours of September 13, 2013. Security cameras later showed the couple wandering between aisles, while overnight employees stocked shelves around them. And customers continued filtering through the store like any other late-night shift. At first, nothing about the situation appeared especially unusual. According to later reports, loss prevention employees eventually began monitoring Tiffany after suspecting she was attempting to shoplift merchandise valued at around $20. Then, shortly before 2 a.m., employees approached the couple near the exit area. What happened next unfolded quickly. Tiffany reportedly struggled with store personnel near the front doors. During the confusion, she abandoned her purse, phone, shoes, and other belongings near the entrance. Then she ran, barefoot. Surveillance footage captured Tiffany sprinting out through the automatic doors and into the Walmart parking lot at approximately 2:04 a.m. Within seconds, she disappeared beyond the visible range of the exterior cameras. That footage became the final confirmed sighting of Tiffany Whitton. One detail that later drew significant attention involved Red Caudle's actions immediately afterward. According to reports, he remained near the entrance area after Tiffany fled rather than immediately chasing after her. Later, Red stated that he searched the parking lot and surrounding area trying to locate Tiffany after she disappeared from view. He also reportedly drove to a nearby IHOP where Tiffany had previously worked and spoke with one of her former co-workers, Sheila Fuller. At one point, he mentioned that he still had Tiffany's phone and was charging it. But despite those efforts, Tiffany never resurfaced. As the hours passed, the situation still did not immediately develop into a full missing person emergency. Part of the reason was because people close to Tiffany were familiar with periods where she temporarily disappeared during struggles connected to addictions, arrests, or instability in her life. At first, many assumed this might be another short disappearance. Meanwhile, Red continued contacting hospitals, jails, and people who knew Tiffany while attempting to locate her. Phone records later appeared to support portions of those efforts. But there were also details that later raised questions. Red never formally reported Tiffany missing to police. He never directly contacted Tiffany's family to explain the Walmart incident. And according to later accounts, the borrowed truck used that night was cleaned out afterward because drugs had reportedly been left inside. Weeks passed, then months. In November 2013, Tiffany's grandmother, Anita Boyette, reportedly received a civil demand letter connected to the Walmart theft incident. Only then did parts of Tiffany's family begin learning what had happened during the early morning hours of September 13th. By January 2014, roughly 4 months after Tiffany disappeared from the Walmart parking lot, she was finally reported missing officially to the Marietta Police Department. And by that point, investigators were already facing the same unsettling contradiction that still defines the case years later. A woman runs barefoot out of a brightly lit Walmart, surrounded by cameras, employees, and parked cars, then disappears before anyone fully realizes she is truly gone. 4 months had already passed by the time Tiffany Whitton was officially reported missing in January 2014. By then, investigators were not starting with a fresh disappearance. They were trying to reconstruct a timeline that had already gone cold. Early on, the case reportedly received limited urgency. People around Tiffany were familiar with her struggles involving addiction, arrests, and periods where she temporarily disappeared from contact. At first, some assumed she would eventually resurface on her own. But as weeks turned into months without a single confirmed sighting, the situation became harder to dismiss. One of the investigators who later focused heavily on the case was Detective Johnny Moeller. Like many others, he repeatedly reviewed the Walmart surveillance footage from the early morning hours of September 13, 2013. The footage itself was brief. Tiffany running barefoot through the automatic doors. Red Caudle remaining near the entrance after she disappeared into the parking lot. Then nothing. No camera clearly captured where Tiffany went after leaving the visible range outside the store. As investigators began examining Red's statements more closely, several inconsistencies reportedly started drawing attention. At one point, Red claimed he had threatened Walmart employees with a weapon while trying to rescue Tiffany during the confrontation inside the store. But investigators later determined that story did not match the surveillance footage, and Red eventually admitted portions of it were exaggerated. Other details also raised questions. He never formally reported Tiffany missing. He never directly contacted her family after the Walmart incident. and investigators were aware of ongoing instability and conflict within the relationship before Tiffany disappeared. Still, suspicion alone was not enough to establish what happened after Tiffany left the parking lot. In March 2014, investigators executed a raid at the Powder Springs property connected to Red and several other individuals. Authorities reportedly recovered drugs, firearms, and syringes from the residence. 8 people were arrested, including Red Caudle. But even after the arrests, investigators still had no direct physical evidence establishing what happened to Tiffany Whitton. The investigation continued. In July 2014, cadaver dogs and search teams were brought to property connected to Red's family. Investigators excavated portions of a backyard, searching for possible evidence. Nothing connected conclusively to Tiffany was recovered. Then another lead emerged. According to later reports, an inmate claimed Red had spoken about placing Tiffany's body inside a concrete-filled barrel and dumping it into Lake Allatoona near Bethany Bridge. Investigators responded aggressively to the tip. Divers searched the lake. Sonar equipment scanned underwater areas connected to the claim. At one point, search teams did recover a concrete barrel-like object from the water, but it was unrelated construction debris. Again, the investigation returned to the same problem. Strong suspicion, fragmented leads, and no definitive evidence explaining where Tiffany went after leaving Walmart. In 2015, Red Caudle later pleaded guilty to methamphetamine trafficking and illegal firearm possession charges unrelated to Tiffany's disappearance, and received a lengthy prison sentence. During later proceedings, discussion surrounding his lack of cooperation in the Whitton investigation continued drawing attention. But he was never charged in connection with Tiffany's disappearance itself. Over time, the case was eventually transferred to Cobb County's Cold Case Unit. Tips continued coming in, searches continued, rumors continued. But years later, investigators still could not answer the question at the center of the entire case. What happened in the minutes after Tiffany Whitton ran barefoot out of that Walmart parking lot at 2:04 a.m.? Because despite surveillance footage, witness statements, searches, arrests, interviews, and years of investigation, no one has ever been able to fully account for where Tiffany went next. Years later, investigators still have not established a definitive explanation for what happened after Tiffany Whitton disappeared from the Walmart parking lot. And because there is no body, no confirmed sightings, and no clear physical evidence showing where she went after 2:04 a.m., the case remains suspended between several competing theories, each one explaining certain details while leaving others unanswered. The theory that continues drawing the most attention involves Ashley Red Caudle. For investigators and members of Tiffany's family, several aspects of Red's behavior after the disappearance remain difficult to ignore. He was the last known person with Tiffany inside Walmart. He did not formally report her missing. Some of his statements later changed or proved inaccurate. And the relationship itself was reportedly volatile in the weeks leading up to Tiffany's disappearance. Family members, especially Tiffany's mother, publicly expressed the belief that Red knew more than he admitted. But even with those suspicions, investigators still faced the same problem. They could not place Tiffany back with Red after she ran from the store. No surveillance footage showed direct violence. No forensic evidence publicly connected him to a homicide. And despite years of searches, no confirmed evidence has ever established where Tiffany's body might have been taken. That uncertainty kept the case open. Another possibility is that Tiffany ran from Walmart and encountered danger afterward, unrelated to Red himself. At the time, Tiffany was struggling heavily with addiction and instability. She left the store barefoot without her phone, money, or personal belongings during the middle of the night. Some investigators and observers believe she may have wandered into another dangerous situation shortly after leaving the parking lot. An overdose an accident, exposure, or violence connected to people within the drug world surrounding her life at the time. But that theory also creates difficult questions. Tiffany had disappeared temporarily before. Yet, according to people close to her, she usually resurfaced eventually. And after September 2013, her online activity, communication, and known contacts appeared to stop almost completely. For many people following the case, that silence feels unusually complete. Another theory focuses on the possibility that Tiffany encountered an unknown third party after leaving Walmart. The Atlanta area saw multiple disappearances and violent crimes involving vulnerable women during that broader time period. Tiffany was alone, barefoot, visibly distressed, and moving through a large parking lot near major roads in the middle of the night. Under those circumstances, some believe she could have crossed paths with someone opportunistic after leaving camera range. But again, investigators were left with almost no evidence capable of proving it. No confirmed witnesses, no vehicle identification, no reliable trail after the parking lot footage ends. Then there is the smallest and perhaps most controversial possibility that Tiffany survived and intentionally disappeared. Rumors circulated after family members reportedly received or heard about possible contact connected to Tiffany months later, including an alleged call received through an app in early 2014. But none of those claims were ever fully verified publicly. And as the years continued passing without financial activity, confirmed sightings, or direct communication with her daughter or family, fewer people considered that explanation likely. In the end, every theory surrounding Tiffany Whitton seems to collide with the same unresolved contradiction. A woman visibly runs out of a Walmart barefoot in the middle of the night. Then, almost immediately afterward, the trail collapses completely. And more than a decade later, investigators still cannot fully explain whether Tiffany Whitton was running from someone, toward someone, or simply into circumstances she never escaped.
I know at one point I was told by Marietta police that she had accepted a couple of friend requests after that date. And how could she have done that? She had no phone and no computer and no place to live. So I don't know how she would have responded to friend requests after that date. So I feel like whoever had her phone did that. Said over and over that he would take a lie detector test, but when he was given the opportunity to do that, he refused. The communication that I've had with him was mainly saying to him, look, I just want to know where she is. I just want that peace, to know that she's at peace. And you can give me that. But so far, he has not.
She had the biggest heart. She would give you the shirt off her back. Like, she was a great person, and people tend to not see that. And so that was kind of the hard part for me. I feel like she wasn't taken as seriously.
It's just hard to like know that she wasn't there, like to think about that she wasn't there to see it.
She would have been really proud.
Yeah, and that's what I think about, that she would have been proud. It just sucks that she couldn't have been there. Because I don't have any memories really.
My intelligent mind tells me she's not still alive. In my heart, I want to believe that she is. It's a huge conflict for me, and I just need to know, because I feel like I've lived the last 11 years just in limbo. In the long run, all that matters to me is knowing either she's here on earth and she's happy and healthy, or she's in heaven. And I just need to know one of those two things.
One of the hardest parts of the Tiffany Whitton case is not only that she disappeared. It is how long it took people to fully understand that something irreversible may have already happened. At first, the silence around Tiffany did not immediately feel abnormal. That detail appears repeatedly throughout the timeline. Friends assumed she was caught up in drugs again. Others believed she would eventually end up in jail, detox, or staying with someone temporarily before resurfacing the way she had before. Even family members, people who loved her deeply, were already familiar with periods where communication suddenly stopped for days at a time. And that reality changes how people react, not because they stop caring, but because instability slowly reshapes expectations. When someone disappears repeatedly throughout their life, each disappearance can begin feeling less urgent than the last. The panic becomes delayed. The fear arrives more slowly. People convince themselves there is still time. That pattern sits quietly underneath almost every part of Tiffany's case. Because if a college student vanished barefoot from a Walmart parking lot at 2 a.m., the reaction might have looked very different immediately. But Tiffany Whitton was struggling with addiction. She had prior arrests. She lived inside a world many people already associated with chaos and self-destruction. And sometimes once society places someone into that category, their danger starts looking less exceptional, even when it should not. That does not mean investigators ignored the case completely. Searches happened. Interviews happened. Tips were followed. Detectives continued working leads for years afterward. But the early hours of a disappearance matter. And in Tiffany's case, those early hours slipped away while many people still believed she would eventually walk back into her old life somehow. She never did. That uncomfortable reality became one of the reasons the case stayed with so many people long after the headlines faded. Because Tiffany Whitton existed in a space where vulnerability and suspicion blurred together. To some people, she looked like a young mother trapped in addiction and instability. To others, she looked like someone making reckless choices who eventually disappeared into the same dangerous world surrounding her. But neither version changes the central fact of the case. A 26-year-old woman vanished after running barefoot out of a Walmart parking lot. And more than a decade later, nobody has been able to explain with certainty what happened afterward. Maybe that is why the surveillance footage still unset people so deeply. Not because the video itself shows violence, but because it captures a moment where everyone still believed Tiffany Whitton would probably come back. And without realizing it, they may have been watching the final seconds of her known life. More than a decade after Tiffany Whitton disappeared from that Walmart parking lot in Marietta, Georgia, the case remains officially unsolved. No confirmed remains have ever been recovered. No verified sightings have publicly established where Tiffany went after she ran out of the store barefoot during the early morning hours of September 13, 2013. And despite years of investigation, searches, interviews, and tips, investigators still cannot fully explain what happened after the surveillance footage ends. The case eventually moved into Cobb County's cold case system, where detectives continued reviewing leads long after the original investigation slowed down. Tips still arrive periodically. Searches have continued at different points over the years. Family members have repeatedly pushed for renewed attention, hoping that someone connected to Tiffany's life in 2013 may eventually decide to speak honestly about what they know. In 2024, Ashley Red Caudle was released from prison after serving time on unrelated drug and firearm charges. That development brought renewed discussion back to the case once again. Not because investigators suddenly solved the disappearance, but because Tiffany Whitton's name never fully disappeared from public memory. For her family, the passage of time has not made the questions easier. Her mother and grandmother have continued speaking publicly about Tiffany for years, trying to keep attention focused on the fact that behind the addiction, arrests, and instability was still a daughter, a mother, and a human being who vanished under deeply unresolved circumstances. And maybe that is the part of the story that continues lingering long after the investigation details fade. Because Tiffany Whitton's disappearance forces people into an uncomfortable realization. Sometimes a person can be visibly falling apart long before they physically disappear. Sometimes instability becomes so normal around someone that the warning signs stop feeling urgent. People assume there will always be another chance to help, another phone call, another arrest. Another time they resurface, until one day they don't. And years later, the final confirmed image of Tiffany Whitton still feels strangely unfinished. A young woman running barefoot through the Walmart parking lot at 2:04 in the morning, leaving behind her phone, her shoes, and every clear explanation for where she went next. Maybe someone still knows what happened after she crossed beyond those cameras. Maybe the answer has existed quietly for years inside conversations nobody has fully shared yet. But until Tiffany Whitton is finally found, the case will remain trapped in the same unanswered space where it began. Between suspicion and proof, between disappearance and neglect, and between the moment people assumed Tiffany would eventually come back, and the moment they realized she never would.